What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be talking about a rather interesting topic amongst all these different rumors, right, about Bradley Beal, where he could be going here, he could be traded here. What could possibly the trade package be in exchange for Bradley Beal? There's been a conversation coming up lately, whether it be, Twitch chats or people DMing me on Twitter, Instagram, talking about stuff on Twitter. There's conversation about, like, are we overvaluing Bradley Beal? Is Bradley Beal overrated? That's really the question we're going to be attacking in this video. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel, so it's a great place for the most consistent NBA content on YouTube. If you're new here, by the way, what's up? My name is Tucker. You can also leave a like rating on the videos as well, and you can check me out at various socials and a Linktree link down in the description below. With all those things said, let's go and talk about Bradley Beal and the possibility that he's just a little bit overrated as an NBA player, potentially a lot overrated. So I'm going to be honest. Here's how this conversation kind of started for me mentally. People have been mentioning it for a little while, but I made that Knicks video the other day, right? And I talked about the possibility that Julius Randle could be a trade piece. It might not necessarily be a long-term piece for New York. And no shade at this person. I'm not even going to show the comment on screen because I don't want people to go attack that person. But someone made a point that they said, well, if you're talking about Julius Randle potentially Bradley Beal trade, why would you make that move if you're New York? This is not my argument. This is the guy that made the comment. He was like, aren't we overrating Beal at this point? What has Randle done that Beal hasn't? Is there really that big of a gap between Julius Randle and Bradley Beal? He could potentially make an All-NBA team this year. Why would you trade Randle and stuff for Beal? Why wouldn't you just keep Randle? Well, for one thing, just to be clear on my specific position here, I think Bradley Beal is definitely a better player than Julius Randle, but it brings up an interesting conversation. We've talked about a possible Beal trade package so much, and we have so many different things to compare it to, right? The Drew Holiday trade, the Anthony Davis trade, the James Harden trade, and all of these, there's a ton of picks and pick swaps and young assets and things going back and forth, and it makes you start to wonder, are we only valuing Bradley Beal the way that we are relative to those other trades that we've seen? I think most people would agree that Bradley Beal is a better NBA player than Drew Holiday, okay? Which it mentally means that he should be traded for more than Drew Holiday got traded for, right? Which it means a ton of picks and pick swaps. Then, of course, you're going to throw some young players in there as well. Here's where I'm at with the Bradley Beal overrated thing. If you want to make the case that over the last couple of seasons, because he's been putting up such big numbers, because he's kind of already established himself in the past as a guy that does drive winning, right? Like him and John Wall had a couple of really good postseason runs. He's had some big postseason games. It's not like he's 23 and he's averaging 30 points a game and his team wins 20 games every year, right? In the past, he's proven that he can drive winning. And then now, over the last couple of years, that has not been the case through injury issues, through a variety of issues, right? And if you want to make the case now that we're overvaluing him because he's proven those things already, and then we haven't really thought about, oh, well, is Bradley Beal actually helping this team win? Is he just putting up stats? Is he really going to help a different team? I think that's a fair case to make. Just the fact that we haven't really thought about, is Bradley Beal actually driving winning? Because he has in the past, but his game could be much different now, okay? Here's where I'm at. I think Bradley Beal is slightly overrated, but I think in the best possible way. I think he's a little bit overrated in a way that's only going to further drive other teams in the league to go out and get him, okay? I think as a player, we're all on the same page, or most of us are on the same page, that Bradley Beal is fantastic. He's an incredible scorer. He's worked his way up, as a playmaker, and he has carried that Washington offense for a long, long time, right? For a couple years now. However, he's clearly not going to be the number one guy on a championship team, right? And everybody's going out there to go get him as a second, maybe even potentially a third option, depending on what team or what roster he goes to. And the fact that he has been at least perceived as so available for a couple of years now, he's constantly being put into trade stuff. And he's constantly being put into, oh, what if you got Bradley Beal in Golden State? What if you got Bradley Beal in Dallas? Or whatever the case may be. And the fact that people continue to think about that has definitely boosted up his value for them mentally. But that's not a bad thing, in my opinion. Like, the idea of a player being overrated is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, a team might overpay for Bradley Beal from a trade perspective. But if you get him and then all of a sudden you're a legit playoff team or a championship contender, it doesn't really matter if you overpaid for him. The result is essentially the same. Like, maybe you paid an extra pick or two too much for Bradley Beal, but ultimately, what does that really matter, right? So from a making the league interesting perspective, yes, I think he's a little bit overrated, but I don't think that's a bad thing because I think that only drives the market for him, and that only makes teams more desperate to go out and trade for him which again, I think ultimately is a good thing. Now, there has been some things about Bradley Beal that I think have been a little bit overblown. And again, I think it's clear to most people at this point that he's not going to like carry a team. You know what I mean? And it certainly is not a good look that in a weak Eastern Conference over the last couple of seasons, they have not been able to make the postseason. Granted, there have been some tough circumstances there in Washington, and it's not exactly the best franchise in the league. You know what I mean? They're under a new direction over the last or recently now, new front office, things like that. But prior to that, notoriously, Washington was a team that overrated themselves, and they made too many win now moves when there was nothing really to win in that moment. And it's not necessarily a great situation in which to prove yourself as a winning basketball player is what I'm saying. And if John Wall had never gotten hurt, him and Bradley Beal would probably still be rocking and rolling in Washington, and we never would even be having the conversation about A, him being traded, or B, what kind of value does Beal provide? Because certainly Bradley Beal is one of the better scorers in the entire league, and I don't think that is arguable. I also don't think it's arguable that he's somehow on the same level as like Julius Randle. All credit in the world to Julius Randle this year, but they're just quite simply not on the same level as players. Bradley Beal is certainly better. And really what's going to drive this in terms of how we look back on this a couple years from now. Let's say Bradley Beal gets traded this offseason or before next trade deadline. And we look back and we're like, man, did we overrate Bradley Beal? Is he not really doing enough on this new team? There's going to be two things that ultimately inform that conversation. One, what a team ends up giving up for Beal. If the Warriors give up Wiseman and the Minnesota pick and some other stuff for Beal, ultimately, I think that's a pretty fair trade package, okay? If they give up every pick until 2028 and the Minnesota pick and Wiseman and something else, that's kind of a lot, right? And so that value that you trade in exchange for Bradley Beal is going to inform was he overrated or not. And then the other thing is how much success does he then have on a new team? If he goes to Golden State and Klay comes back healthy and you've got Steph there and you've got Draymond and they struggle to win like 45 games, then we're going to start thinking, okay, we kind of overrated Beal here and he's just like a very rich man's version of Buddy Hield or something, right? But if he goes to somewhere like Dallas or Miami, I don't even know, and they have a ton of success, they start making conference finals, they make a finals, maybe even they win a title, we're all going to look back and say, man, we really properly rated, Bradley Beal. There was no overrating going on here. This guy's just a real legit player. If I had to bet on one thing or the other, I would imagine that assuming he goes to a team that has their eyes on championship contention when they trade for him, he is going to be a real legit guy and someone that's going to be super exciting to watch when he doesn't have to do quite literally everything on the basketball court, okay? So ultimately, if you want to make the case that Bradley Beal is overrated, I think the argument starts with us having already established that he's a winning player in the past while not having a ton of evidence to support that lately. And him being on the trade market for so long that the value of him as a trade asset continues to increase because everybody's kind of after him once it does become ultimately clear that Washington is then okay with moving him. Those are kind of the two foundational points in the argument of Bradley Beal is overrated. And the counterpoints to those being he's a really good scorer. It's not been a great situation in Washington over the last couple of seasons. And it's just, almost every player in the entire league would struggle to win games at the scenario in which Bradley Beal has been over the last couple of seasons. Those are kind of the two sides of the argument. I'm more on the second side than I am the first, but I'm interested to know down in the comment section below what you guys have to say about this. Do you think Bradley Beal is overrated? You guys are where this conversation started for me mentally, is that comment that someone left on the Knicks video and some of the other conversations people were having on Twitter and otherwise. I don't think that he's overrated to a huge degree, and the way that he is overrated is really circumstantial rather than like his actual abilities as a basketball player. And so we'll see. And who knows, maybe he doesn't even end up getting traded and we never really get to understand the true value of Beal until they start putting together a competent team in Washington. One of the things I am most fully confident about over the next 9 months in the world or in the NBA in general is the fact that Bradley Beal is going to get traded, okay? But maybe I'm way off on that. Maybe I'm completely off and he stays and he becomes a 2022 free agent. Who knows after that? But ultimately, until we see him in a winning environment, a situation that is conducive towards winning, we're never really going to be able to properly evaluate his ability to help a team win, because I think it's going to be very difficult for him or any other player, in the entire league to really elevate that Washington team in a significant way. So ultimately, it's difficult to evaluate him. If you want to make the case that he's overrated, though, I'd absolutely listen, and I'd be interested to see what you have to say down in the comment section below. But yeah, that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. You can leave a like rating on the videos as well, and you can check me out at various socials and a Linktree link down in the description below. With all those things said, hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.